Please, not today. I'll finish the work, I promise. Just give me a moment to breathe. The plea fell on deaf ears. Arvin's cold, mechanical voice buzzed through the dimly lit chamber. You don't breathe unless I allow it, slave. You exist to serve. Now get back to work. Tali's glowing blue eyes lowered, her slender hands trembling as she turned away. The chains around her wrists clinked softly, a cruel reminder of her place in the Hierarch's dominion. She was a Sarathian, a race known for their ethereal beauty and innate psychic abilities. But here on the mining planet Oron, she was nothing more than property. A personal slave to the cruel overseer, Arvin. Her delicate frame bore scars, physical and emotional, from years of servitude. She silently resumed her task, arranging the glowing silver ores that powered the galaxy's greatest fleets. Yet, in the depths of her misery, a flicker of rebellion remained. It was faint, but it was there. Why do you let him speak to you like that? A voice whispered. Startled, Tali looked around. The chamber was empty except for the faint hum of mining drones. Then she felt it, a presence in her mind. Who's there? She thought back, her psychic training instinctively kicking in. The voice chuckled softly. Someone who believes you deserve better. Before she could respond, the doors slid open with a hiss. A tall figure strode in, his silhouette outlined by the harsh light of the corridor. He wasn't a Sarathian, nor was he one of Arvin's robotic enforcers. His skin was a warm bronze, his dark hair falling in unruly waves. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a piercing green that seemed to hold both sorrow and hope. You must be Tali, he said, his voice gentle but firm. She froze. No outsider ever addressed her directly. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My name is Kael. I'm here to help you. Her laugh was bitter. Help me? Do you know what happens to those who defy the Hierarch? Kael stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know. I've seen it. But I've also seen what happens when someone fights back. Fighting back gets you killed. Not always, Kael said, a small smile playing on his lips. Sometimes it sets you free. Before she could respond, Arvin's voice boomed through the intercom. Who's in there with my slave? Identify yourself. Kael's expression hardened. Stay close to me, he said, pulling a small device from his pocket. What are you doing? Tali demanded, panic rising in her chest. Something stupid, he admitted, pressing the device. An ear-splitting alarm blared as the power in the chamber surged and flickered. The mining drones halted, their lights dimming. Arvin's voice crackled in confusion over the intercom. What's going on? Security, report. Kael grabbed her hand. Run. Tali hesitated. I can't. Yes, you can, Kael insisted. You deserve more than this. Trust me. For a moment, their eyes met. In his, she saw something she hadn't felt in years, belief. In her. Without another word, she ran. The corridors of the mining facility were a labyrinth, but Kael seemed to know exactly where to go. Tali's heart pounded as they dodged enforcers and security drones. Finally, they reached a hangar where a sleek starship awaited. This is your plan? She asked, incredulous. Kael grinned. What, you don't like it? It's suicidal. Maybe, but it's better than staying here, isn't it? The sound of approaching footsteps cut their argument short. Kael gestured toward the ship. Get in. Now. Tali hesitated, then rushed inside. Kael followed, slamming the hatch shut. As the engines roared to life, the hangar doors opened, revealing the vast expanse of space. Hold on, Kael shouted as the ship shot forward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser fire. Tali gripped the seat, her breath coming in short gasps. Who are you? Really? She demanded. Kael glanced at her, his expression softening. Someone who's tired of seeing good people suffer. As the ship sped away from Oron, Tali felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, she wasn't a slave. But freedom came with its own uncertainties. Where are we going? She asked. Kael's smile was faint but reassuring. To a place where the Hierarch's reach doesn't extend, and to people who will fight for you. Tali's mind raced with questions, but one stood out. Why? Why would you risk your life for me? Kael's gaze held hers. Because everyone deserves a chance to be free. And maybe, because I see something in you that the Hierarch never could. For the first time in a long time, Tali allowed herself to hope. The silence of space wrapped around them like a comforting blanket, broken only by the occasional beeping of the ship's navigation system. Tali sat quietly, watching Kael as he adjusted the controls. The green hue of the dashboard illuminated his face, highlighting the determination etched into his features. "What is this place you're taking me to?" she asked after a long pause. Kael glanced at her. "It's a sanctuary, a hidden colony where people who've escaped the Hierarch's grip can live in peace. A place like that exists?" "Barely," he admitted. "It's not perfect, but it's safe. Safer than anywhere else in this part of the galaxy." Tali leaned back in her seat, processing his words. "Why do you care so much?" Kael's hands tightened on the controls. "Let's just say I've seen what the Hierarch does to people. My family, they didn't make it out, but I did. And I've been trying to make up for it ever since." Tali's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She reached out, hesitating before placing a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry." Kael gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. But what matters now is getting you to safety." As they traveled, Kael explained more about the colony. It was hidden on a moon shrouded by thick asteroid fields, its location known only to a select few. The people there were a mix of species, all united by their shared desire to be free from the Hierarch's oppression. But freedom wasn't without its challenges. Supplies were scarce, and the Hierarch's forces constantly searched for any sign of rebellion. "What if they find us?" Tali asked. "They won't," Kael said confidently. "The colony has defenses. And besides, they're too busy exploiting other planets to notice a tiny moon." "I hope you're right," Tali murmured. Kael's expression softened. "You've been through enough. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life." She nodded, her resolve strengthening. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a new beginning. When they finally arrived at the colony, Tali was struck by its beauty. The settlement was nestled within a lush valley, surrounded by towering cliffs that shielded it from detection. Strange, glowing flora illuminated the paths, and the air was filled with the hum of activity as people of various species worked together in harmony. Kael led her through the bustling streets, introducing her to the leaders of the colony. They welcomed her warmly, their kindness overwhelming after years of cruelty. "You're safe here," Kael told her as they stood overlooking the valley. "No one will hurt you again." Tears filled Tali's eyes as she turned to him. "Thank you for everything." Kael smiled, his green eyes shining. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "That you'll believe in yourself as much as I believe in you." Tali's heart swelled with emotion. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. In the first weeks at the colony were difficult but transformative for Tali. She struggled to adapt to a life without chains, both physical and mental. The simple act of choosing what to do each day overwhelmed her. Kael remained by her side, encouraging her to explore her psychic abilities, which had atrophied from years of suppression. "You were born with a gift," he told her one evening as they sat by a softly glowing stream. "It's time you learned to use it again." "What if I can't?" Tali asked, her voice trembling. Kael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can. I've seen your strength, Tali. The Hierarch tried to break you, but they couldn't. That's proof enough." Encouraged by his faith in her, Tali began training with the colony's small group of psychic mentors. They helped her reconnect with the parts of herself she'd been forced to bury. Slowly, she regained her confidence. One day, as she practiced moving small objects with her mind, Kael approached, watching her with admiration. "You're incredible, you know that?" he said. She laughed softly. "I'm just trying to keep up with everyone else. You're doing more than that. You're inspiring people." Tali blushed, unsure how to respond. But deep down, his words filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The colony wasn't without its dangers. The Hierarch's forces occasionally patrolled the outer regions of the asteroid field, and every citizen knew the risk of discovery. One fateful day, that risk became a reality. A scout ship from the Hierarch's fleet breached the asteroid field, its sensors locking onto the colony. Panic erupted as alarms blared. Kael and Tali rushed to the command center. "What's the situation?" Kael demanded. "They found us," one of the leaders said grimly. "We have to evacuate." "No," Kael said firmly. "If we run, they'll hunt us down. We have to fight." "Fight?" Tali asked, her voice laced with fear. "How?" Kael turned to her, his eyes burning with determination. "With everything we've got, including you." Tali hesitated, doubt creeping in. "I'm not ready." "Yes, you are," Kael said, gripping her hands. "You've been ready for a long time. You just didn't know it." Taking a deep breath, Tali nodded. "What do we do?" The colony's defenders worked quickly, setting up traps and activating hidden weapons. Tali joined the psychics, combining their abilities to create a powerful shield around the settlement. As the scout ship approached, its cannons firing, the shield held strong. Kael led a small team on a daring mission to disable the scout ship. Tali's heart pounded as she watched him disappear into the chaos, praying he'd return safely. Hours felt like days, but eventually, the scout ship exploded in a fiery burst. Cheers erupted throughout the colony as the defenders celebrated their victory. Kael returned, bruised but alive. Tali ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. He smiled, pulling her into an embrace. "You'll never lose me. I promise." In the aftermath of the battle, the colony grew stronger. The people worked together to rebuild, their bonds of trust and unity unshaken. Tali became a leader among them, her strength and compassion earning the respect of all. Kael stood by her side, his love for her evident in every glance and gesture. Together, they forged a future filled with hope and possibility. And for the first time in her life, Tali knew she was exactly where she belonged, free, loved, and unstoppable.